Welcome and bienvenidos to our new program called Next Generation, highlighting the many creative journeys of next generation leaders. In this series, I will bring you the stories of young leaders in science, literature, medicine, education, and business. Those who have chosen to reach further, travel farther, innovate, and take the risks often necessary to make a difference in their own lives, in those of their families, their communities, and someday in the world. My name is Julieta Garcia. For over 22 years, I had the great privilege of serving as president of the University of Texas at Brownsville. Through that work, I came to know the stories of many of our students that overcame great obstacles to attend college and through great sacrifice of their own and of their families, make it through. Getting to know their stories was always a great inspiration to me. So I thought I'd chase some of them down, interview them, and let you hear in their own words what they're up to now, what their challenges were, and what they hope to accomplish in the future. I promise you will be as inspired, amazed, and humbled by their accomplishments as I have been. Now let's get started. Welcome to our new year of stories. We are thrilled to be back with you again this year to tell stories about our students and what they're doing in the world now to make their communities, their state, and their world a better place for all of us. As you recall, I interviewed Stephanie Vega last year about this same time, and Stephanie was at a very crucial point in her career. She was in her last few months as a doctoral student at UTMB, which is University of Texas Galveston Medical School. And there she was doing some research in regenerative medicine, growing lungs that would eventually be improved and refined so that each of us could have a tailor-made with our own DNA lungs should we ever need it. So we're going to catch up with her on that. And then we're going to find out how it went with her with her research and with her defense, and then through her commencement, and then find out what she's doing now. So, Stephanie, are you there?
I'm here.
Thank you again, Stephanie. Happy New Year to you, and thank you so much for letting us chase you down again and get the second chapter to your story.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of this.
Absolutely. Okay, so as I said a moment ago, about a year ago, you were in a high stress moment. You were about to get ready for your exams and then to defend your work. And then, so tell us about those few months and how it went for you.
Yes, those last few months being a PhD student were very stressful. I had a lot of work to do. I was working on my dissertation, so that's the written dissertation that you must submit to the graduate school as part of a requirement for graduation. And I had also just gotten the okay for my committee members to schedule my final defense. So all of my committee members agreed that I was ready to do my final defense. And so getting their approval was, is big for a PhD student, because once they okay you to schedule your final defense, they agree that you're ready. You're ready to be done. You've met all the requirements. And so I was in the process of writing, and writing your dissertation, and the dissertations are so long and it feels like it's never going to end. And, you have so many things to write about and data. So I was writing, and I finally picked a date with my committee when they could all be available. I set up my final defense, and so I finished my dissertation, finally finished writing my dissertation, submitted that to the graduate school, scheduled my final defense, and while all of this is going on, I felt excitement, but I felt really stressed. You do feel overwhelmed with work, but you see the light at the end of the tunnel. You're almost done.
Finally.
So it was just all these range of emotions, excitement, but, stress. The day of the defense comes, and
what day was that, Stephanie?
That was April 5th.
Okay, April 6th. So when the committee tells you you're ready, that means you're not done. It simply means they believe you're ready to go through that last process of defending your dissertation.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that means that they all agree that they think you're ready for your final defense, but yes, the final defense still has to be passed, for you to get your degree.
Exactly.
And so, so the part of the final defense is the 1 hour presentation that's open to the public. And so anybody from the university or just the general public here in Galveston could attend the final defense. And so the first hour was me presenting my final defense, all of my data, everything I've done in these almost 6 years in an hour presentation. And so it took me a while with my mentor to prepare my PowerPoint presentation and practice it to be ready for it.
Now tell me, tell me about that for a minute. Tell me who you invited. Did you invite anyone in particular to come?
So they usually have announcements from the university, and they invite anybody from campus or anybody you would like to invite. I did invite some friends, some close friends of mine. My parents were there. So I did have people who were close to me who were there present for my final dissertation.
Which adds to the stress sometimes, doesn't it?
It does because now you have people, who are close to you, and this is the first time some of them were ever hearing about all of my work. You talk to your friends and family about it, but this is the first time they're seeing it presented like this.
Yeah.
And so
they all came. So you had your audience, and then?
And so I was ready. I had practiced with my mentor. My PowerPoint was great. I made it, so that I could tell the story I wanted to tell of how we started this project, the data I was able to obtain, the results. So I presented, and starting off a presentation, I had practiced this so many times, but starting off is usually, you try to get the feel for it and how your story is going to flow and what you're going to say. But once I got started, I knew exactly what to say because I had been practicing this for so long, and it wasn't the first time I presented my research. Thankfully, my mentor, I appreciate everything she's done for me. She would make me join any seminar, any type of presentation that she could, put me in. She wanted me to do it because it's all practice. And every presentation you do is great practice for your final defense.
Absolutely. Now, remind us who your mentor is and was.
My PhD mentor was Dr. Joan Nichols.
Yes.
She is the Associate Director for the Galveston National Lab here at UTMB.
Yes. And so you've been working as part of her team for quite a while.
I have. I've been working in her lab for close to 6 years. The first year was as a prep student, and the rest is for my PhD. So I have been working in the lab for quite some time. So I the research I was presenting for my final defense, I knew it by heart. I knew my data by heart. So that helped when I was presenting. I knew everything that I was talking about. I knew how to explain it well because I had practiced it so many times.
Of course.
So during that hour, I presented. You have people from the audience will ask questions. But then after that hour, then is when you are in the room by yourself. The audience leaves, and the only people who are left in the room with you are your committee members. And I had 5 committee members. So the audience left, and I am left in the room alone with my committee members because now it's the time for them to bombard you with questions and really see if you deserve the PhD.
Right.
And so my actual defense with them lasted about 2 hours.
Oh, my goodness. An additional 2 hours then.
An additional 2 hours
Oh, my
with
goodness.
them. So they were just, asking me questions about my research, about, how I would approach this other problem or, just anything. Anything is fair game. When you're in there with them, they can ask you about any single thing they want.
That's right. Yeah.
And so But I did really well. I was in there with them for a while. They asked me all different types of questions. Thankfully, one of the things my mentor also taught me is that when you're answering questions like this with your committee, they want to see how well you answer questions, but also how well you carry yourself under pressure when they're in front of you, asking you questions so that you don't get intimidated or just, handle yourself professionally.
Well, this is certainly a big test for that, isn't it? For 2 hours by yourself.
2 hours.
Yeah.
By yourself. And so I passed. And so the point came to where I guess they were comfortable or they were satisfied with the answers I had given. And so they asked me to step out of the room. I stepped out for about 10 minutes.
Oh.
And then they call me to come back into the room. I guess they were deliberating. I come back into the room, and the first thing they tell me is, congratulations, you have passed your final examination. You are now Dr. Vega.
First time anyone's ever called you that name, right? Dr. Vega?
Yes. And so I was still, my head, I couldn't wrap my head around the idea that I was done, that I did it, that I passed my final examination. That this is what I had been waiting for all these years, and I had finally achieved it.
Yeah.
So everything went well. The stress and feeling overwhelmed is part of the experience, but once you're done with that, you feel accomplished and you feel like that goal or that dream you had, to obtain your degree is done. You achieved it.
Now,
and you're ready for the next chapter.
Now, from now on, I'm only going to call you Dr. Vega. So the Stephanie stuff is gone. So, Dr. Vega, tell me, was there any moment during the defense when you hesitated or you were caught with unfamiliarity on a topic, or you were a bit, taken off balance?
Yes. One of the things my mentor had told me is when they're asking you questions and you're getting ready to for it to be the end of your defense is when your committee asks you something and you finally say, I don't know, or I'm not sure. Because there's nothing wrong with you. They ask you a question and there really isn't an answer sometimes to the questions they're asking you, but they want to see how well your critical thinking skills are. It's okay to reach a point where you say, it could be this, but I'm not sure. I don't know. And that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were asking me about different kinds of therapies, for lung disease and how I would approach it. And so I gave them really good examples of, what I would do for the particular disease we were talking about. But not much is known about that topic in particular. So, there isn't any right answer and there isn't any wrong answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so we reached a point where we said, when I told them, all of these things could happen, but we're not sure. I'm not sure exactly, what would happen if we do this.
Well, that
and
answer.
When I said that,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
When I said that, they just nodded and they said, yes, you're right. There's not much we know. And so we reached a point where I acknowledged the fact that, there's not much information about this. This is how I would approach it. But there's no wrong or right answer, and you saying that you don't know is perfectly okay.
Absolutely, and it communicates to them a wisdom, probably that they want to hear too, and that is that science is still a field of great inquiry and interest, and so of course, exactly. So that's wonderful that you got to that point. I think we've all been there. And the hard thing is to say, I'm not sure, or that's a good question to investigate further. So they had to maybe test the edges of your expertise at that point, and also understand the wisdom that you would have about responding with much more to be done. And I intend to do some of that myself. So you made it through your very long 3 hours of first interactive presentation and then 2 hours alone with your committee, and then finally them announcing that you had achieved what you had intended to. So then you came out of your committee, and was your family still there?
Yes, my family had been, just they were here on the island, so they spent the time at the beach for a little bit. So they were busy doing other, touristy things
Sure.
on the island while I was doing my final defense. But yes, I came out. I texted my parents, my friends. We all met for lunch.
Oh.
We had, we ate together, we celebrated, they had a cake waiting for me that said
Oh.
congratulations. So it turned into this huge, time to celebrate. And I was
Absolutely.
so thankful that they were here with me. And I still couldn't believe what had just happened. I was still on cloud nine, trying to wrap my head around everything that had just happened. But it was a really nice time. It was a really nice time because I reached my goal. I had my family here to celebrate with me.
Of course.
It was a really nice time that I was able to enjoy.
That's wonderful because oftentimes when we're studying away from home, as you were in Galveston, and when you're studying the kind of things that you've studied and spent so many years in that process, we tend to lose touch with friends. You just don't have as much time to stay connected in the same way. And then with family, the same kind of thing. But you seem to have been able to balance maintaining the relationships that are so important to support you during those tough times, and then carrying them with you now to a new level, and then having your family know what you're doing is really important for your own satisfaction, but also for them. They want to stay a part of this important work. So that celebration sounds lovely.
Yes, it was a really nice time to have them here
Absolutely.
to celebrate with me.
Absolutely. Okay, so then you finished, the celebration is over, and you have a few more things yet to do, and then you go through graduation at UTMB.
Yes, graduation. I had a great time. It was amazing. That's when it kind of, even to that point, I still couldn't, it hadn't hit me yet
Right.
that I had finished. And so I, just getting the gown, the cap and gown, when your name is called up to stage, they talk a little bit about the research you're doing so that, all the audience knows, what kind of work you were doing. My family was there. My friends were there. Even my first grade teacher who kept in contact with my parents, my first grade teacher showed up to my graduation.
Oh, now I've got goosebumps. Oh, okay. Tell us the name of your first grade teacher.
Her name was Miss Rodriguez. That's her last name is Miss Rodriguez. She was from Burns Elementary in Brownsville. She was my first grade teacher. She was one of my favorite teachers, and my parents kept in contact with her and my aunt too, because my little cousin, who is 5 years younger than me, he also had her as a teacher. And so just throughout the years, my parents would see her in Brownsville, and, they exchanged phone numbers and they'd keep in contact. And she would always ask about me, and my parents told her she's in graduate school, until finally one day they said, she's going to graduate. Would you want to come to her graduation? And she came. She was there, my first grade teacher. And she was, it was a happy moment for her because she, I was a little girl when I was with her.
Absolutely.
I'm glad she was able to share it with me.
Of course. How wonderful that your parents thought to invite her and that she went. Because sometimes you don't get to see the fruits of your labor. But this time she got to see them tenfold. So what a nice gesture for you to have invited her and for her to have come. Okay, so now you make it through commencement and then what? How do you feel, say, a week or two after commencement is over?
So the first thing on my mind was, what's the next step? But one of the things I love about my lab is, we focus on lung regeneration, tissue engineering. So as we talked about before, the transplant project, for the pig transplant project we talked about, we published our first set of results this past year. But one of the things, so when I finished, my mentor, Dr. Nichols, was in the process of submitting a grant to continue those studies, to continue the pig transplant studies for X amount of time, but also to examine the lung transplant at 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, even up to a year after they are transplanted into the pigs, a long-term study. And she was also, she received some funding from the Moody Foundation for a separate project about traumatic brain injury and using different stem cell populations to treat traumatic brain injuries. And so I was done, but I was able to get hired as a postdoctoral fellow. In my lab, my mentor had funding for 2 different projects. And so the first thing I did was, I was hired as a postdoctoral fellow to work on the traumatic brain injury project with stem cells, but also work on the next studies for the pig transplant.
For both of them?
Yes, for both of them.
Oh, my.
For both of them.
Oh,
so
my.
One of the things that, I had in my mind this whole time, I said, yes, my goal was always to do a postdoctoral fellowship after graduation. And I did have my eyes in for some fellowships in Houston in the medical center. But one of the things I feel is it's a privilege to work with the stuff we do in the lab for Dr. Nichols, because nobody in the world is as ahead with tissue engineering as she is.
Okay, now say that again and say it more slowly. Nobody in the
world has gone as far as she has with the lung tissue engineering.
That's amazing. And that's because of the duration that you've studied of the lung developing?
Yes. So the lung tissue engineering field is very small. And the people who have attempted to bioengineer whole lungs have only attempted to do this in murine models, in rodent models.
Oh.
Nobody has attempted to do, lung engineering for whole human lungs, and nobody has been able to attempt to do a pig lung transplant for this large animal model. So we were the first to ever, 1, bioengineer a whole human lung, and 2, bioengineer a whole pig lung that was successfully transplanted into a pig. So, before making my next move, I feel attached to these projects because I was part of these projects from the start, and I didn't want to make, a next move. I didn't want to leave the lab without feeling like we advanced as much as we could together as a team. And I wanted to still be part of these studies.
Well, Dr. Vega, it occurs to me that you are taking the next step. You're not an undergraduate. You're not a graduate. You have finished. You're now a postdoc, and it is a next step forward, but in a completely different phase of your career. While you're in the same labs, you are in a different place. So that's extraordinary, an opportunity that you have with Dr. Nichols to take this work now to its next level.
Yes, and so that's what, that work is so exciting to me. It's a privilege to be able to be part of a team that is the first ever to accomplish this much. And so I am currently a postdoctoral fellow in Dr. Nichols' lab working on 2 different projects. And I'm happy. I'm happy with the work we're doing. I'm happy where this work is headed. And I am excited to be part of the work, for whatever else happens with the transplants, closer to preclinical studies. I feel it's a privilege to be part of the team, that's leading lung tissue engineering.
Now, Stephanie, tell me, when you say preclinical studies, tell us about that. What does that mean?
So preclinical studies, before anything goes into a human in a clinical setting, preclinical studies are required to see, if, for example, you're developing a therapeutic, to see how safe, how safe it is before you put it into a human. And so the government does require that for preclinical testing, that any type of drug or therapeutic is tested in a large animal model before it's used for a human.
Okay.
And so
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So because our lab has already, done the testing in the large animal model in the pig, it's considered preclinical testing because we've been able to successfully transplant it into a pig and have the pig survive. So the kind of work we're doing is considered preclinical testing because it's been successful.
That's what I wanted to hear. Okay, that's
yes.
what I wanted to. So this does count as preclinical, even though it's in a pig,
yes.
not in a
yes.
human. Is there another
yes.
stage of preclinical where you actually take it to a human and still considered preclinical?
Yes. So part of the funding that Dr. Nichols has to keep these transplantation studies going is to further examine. So our last time point for survival for the pigs, we had it at 1 month and 2 months. So now to keep the study going and get more data, we need to have it for 3 months, 4 months, up to a year. What happens in 2 years? To have more data available so that, we can better explain what would happen if somebody has this for a year. Is it good for long-term survival? We have other questions that we need to answer before we agree and say, yes, this is ready for a human.
So I'm going to call you Doctora. That fits even better for you. Okay, Doctora. So tell us now, how many years do you estimate it's going to be between where you are right now and the time you have your first regenerated lung in a human being?
Depending on how, all the work we have going goes, I would say anything between 5 to 10 years. Yes.
I wanted to know how long I have to wait for my lung. So the clock is ticking now. So we're going to wait. We're going to be very patient between 5 to 10 years.
Between 5 and 10 years, the field is evolving pretty quickly. The work we're doing is very promising, but we do have a lot of questions we ask ourselves and we want to answer. For example, the first human lung we bioengineered was a pediatric human lung. So one of the first things that would pop into my mind is, let's say we bioengineer a human pediatric lung, transplant it into a pediatric patient. One of the first questions I would have is this lung going to properly grow with the patient as the patient grows?
Yeah.
Will the lung react exactly how it would as a child's lung matures as they get older? Will the immune system be the same?
Yeah.
So there are still other questions that we need to answer, with the studies that we're planning on doing before we say, all our preclinical testing had promising results and now we're ready to, transplant this into a human.
Now, Doctora, let me remind you that we have somebody else doing important work in transplant, in pediatric transplant, and that's Francisco Figueroa, our former chancellor. And he is head of the pediatric transplant unit at UT Science Center San Antonio. So you and he soon need to connect up so that what he has learned from transplanting livers might be very, very relevant, or is that not relevant at all to what you're doing?
It would be, yes. Yes, right? It would be. I mean, yes, it would definitely be. I mean, it's always important. One of the things I also think is important is to have scientists have a better interaction with clinicians.
Okay, so I'm going to connect you two up and make sure. I've told him your story, but now that you are done with your dissertation, you've defended, you're out, you're now doing postdoc, I'm sure he's going to want to talk to you and tell you his experience. Stephanie, I'm going to have to close up now our conversation. I could go on forever listening to your very exciting story. So I guess you started a trend here, Doctora. We are now going to be staying connected to you, not just for the first year, but to learn what happens as you evolve in your own career. Thank you so much, and please receive un abrazo muy grande de todos acá. All of us are so very proud of you, not only your first grade teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, but every one of us who have had a chance to be part of your career. Felicidades.
Thank you. Muchas gracias por el apoyo. Lo aprecio mucho. Muchas gracias.
De nada. Hasta pronto, Doctora Stephanie Vega.
Thank you for tuning in to Next Generation, a program highlighting the next generation of leaders in the Rio Grande Valley and beyond.